I was falling. I had no recollection of how, or when, or even what or where I was, but there was that unmistakable feeling of sudden loss of balance, followed by a loss of footing, and then pure nausea. It felt as if I'd fallen off a flight of stairs, or off the ledge of a balcony. This was followed by a sudden gut-wrenching anticipation, as I could feel the ground rapidly approaching, faster and faster, only to stop, and to feel my heart drop as my eyes opened up. My eyes opened up? This meant, "Rise and shine, Venerin, rise and shine." A voice greeted me, an unfamiliar one raspy and strained. It was a voice that sounded nothing like the young and jovial, severe and ponderous, then panic-ridden, but determined ones that had been my only tether to the real world during my great slumber. Panic settled in as I attempted to scurry away, but to no avail. My eyes struggled to focus. The creature in front of me was about my size, and yet I felt as if it towered over me. Being in this weakened state, I couldn't do much. I could barely even speak as my body attempted to right itself. An adrenaline rush this early on in hibernation wake cycle wasn't healthy. In fact, it wasn't recommended. But it seemed as if the creature in front of me knew that, as additional servitors approached, ones not of our make or model. They grappled with my weakened form, inserting needles and tubes as I bellowed out in silent wails of pain. And then I felt it. I felt a sudden surge of energy hit me as the adrenaline dissipated, my mind clearing and my motor functions returning. They'd mimicked our sleep-wake cycle regulators. But how? "Let's just say we have a promise to keep, dear friend." The creature, no, the human began standing up from its formerly squatting position, supported by its mechanical aids. Its outfit was not too dissimilar from the one that the previous human wore, but it was far more advanced. I could feel the latent energy of a shield belt radiating from it, not to mention it looked a lot more... "Eh? Ah, you're looking at my combat ribbons," the human spoke. "I suppose," I answered back, my voice raspy and gravelly from however many years I'd hibernated for. "Yeah, they do accumulate. You tend to get a lot from 140 years of constant war and special operations." The man chuckled, before coughing wildly. One of his mechanical attendants quickly handed him a cloth as the human began to cough into it. Even with my blurry vision, I could see a distinct crimson color staining the otherwise white fabric, as it was quickly tucked away. "I suppose you don't recognize me, old friend?" I didn't respond, as I began to move slowly, testing the limits of my body as I anticipated the usual bouts of extreme pain and cramping. But none came. Instead, what had replaced the expected pain and cramping was a sense of unencumbered mobility that felt as if I had just risen from a minor blackout rather than a complete hibernative cycle. It didn't feel real, and what's more, the entire situation didn't feel real. "Must still be confused," the human mumbled to himself before turning around towards an unseen figure. "Hey, Mitchell, get your ass over here, why don't you?" he yelled. An air of authority was still noticeable in his voice despite his age. Indeed, it held a distinct familiarity that I just couldn't put my finger on. Wait, could it be? "Elijah, stop acting like it's the early 3400s. Get one of my interns to check up on him." Elijah? No, it couldn't. "Mitch, come on, don't be like that. Didn't you say you'd make the effort? I mean, it's the least you could do after probing around his head for the past fucking century." Another human soon came into view. This one levitated on some sort of half-wheeled vehicle that stopped just mere inches away from me. He held the device in his hands, pointed it at my eyes as sharp flashes of light seared into my skull. "Ah, what trickery is—" The human turned away from me, only to address its superior. "He's perfectly fine, Eli. No need to worry about any potential neurological aberrancies making a mess of your decades-long talks. Heck, I bet the poor soul's probably sick and tired to hell and back of your voice." "Never change, Mitch, never change. Go on, introduce yourself." Reluctantly, this Mitchell turned to face me once more, holding out a wrinkled hand, and forcing his teeth out to bare, a gesture which I instinctively recoiled from. "Oh, it's one of those aliens. Okay, no smiles, got it." His face contorted to one much more amiable. "Hello, Venerin. Elijah and I have been waiting for this moment for a long while now. I'm Dr. Mitchell Burgundy, former director of the Institute for Xenobiological Studies, current principal advisor to the science director of the United Nations Science Council. But you'll perhaps be more acquainted with my former title, head scientist aboard Hibernation Conduit 27A. I blinked rapidly, my dual eyelids twitching to and fro, as I replied simply and earnestly. "I'm sorry, but none of that rings a bell." Mitchell sighed, turning back to the other human as I sensed the early warning signs of a verbal altercation, so I intervened. But while I'm unacquainted with your titles, I certainly have heard of your name, Mitchell. I've heard Elijah talk a great many things about you. This brought the elderly man's eyes to life as he turned back to face me. He has? Ah, well, that's more like it. What did he... Mitch, you said we didn't have much time. Can this wait? You know as well as I that none of this can wait. But fine, he's all yours, boss. The man quickly slunk back into the darkness of the hibernation chamber and onto an attached gangway. This left just me and the elderly human alone, save for a few robot tenders that had remained. Captain Elijah? I practically mumbled out, my mind refusing to believe the discordance brewing inside me. Not quite, my friend, Elijah spoke, his voice cracking for a moment as he stepped towards me. It's Admiral Elijah Schuylerbanes now. He attempted to mimic that energetic and youthful vigor of our now decades-old conversations. Commander of the Fifth Fleet. He chuckled. It rolls off the tongue much better than any of my previous titles, I tell you. A moment of silence filled the air, Elijah seizing the opportunity to raise his hand towards me in a strange gesture. I don't think I ever got your name, friend. I stared at the hand for a moment. My mind took stock of the gesture for the longest while, before I finally figured out what it meant. A fluttering of my frills made it evident that what I was about to do was being done with no intent of offense, as I took his hand in my own and gripped it. My name is Lasara Ta'el Parfun Danier of the Janari clan. I spoke nervously as memories of our promises across the decades entered the forefront of my mind yet again. He held my hand for what felt like an eternity, both of us gazing into one another's eyes. His bright, vibrant eyes locked away in a now wrinkled and disheveled form. The softness of his hands that I distinctly recalled from our last interaction was all but gone, replaced by the hard, wrinkled, and calloused hands of a man now far into his years. It was then, and only then, that I realized the cruelty that was time. What felt like a series of disjointed conversations to me was more than likely an entire lifetime for the human. An entire lifetime without the guarantee of immortality. And judging from the crimson-stained cloths, providing they did bleed red like us, a lifetime dedicated to the greatest honor of all, the adherence to an oath till death. You fulfilled your end of the oath, dear friend. I squeezed his hand tighter as I spoke. Thank you for being my light in the dark. Despite not having truly talked, I feel as if a bond beyond normal comprehension exists between our two souls. The human seemed to nod at that, and gestured for me to follow. We have much to discuss about Lasara, and very little time to do it. With considerable effort on my end, I got to my feet, quickly following the human out of the hibernation airlocks and into the familiarly unfamiliar world. At first glance, all seemed to be in place. The halls were as I'd left them. The lights were where they should be, as were the computer terminals and holoprojectors. Yet none of it was right. The lights were replaced with ones that shone too brightly. The holoprojectors displayed human scripts, text, and other bizarre readings. It was as if I'd awoken to a reality soaked and drenched in humanity's reach and influence, which was to be expected, but never to this degree. And most certainly never to this extent, if Elijah's time frame was to be believed. How long has it been, Elijah? Oh, 170, maybe 180 years, give or take a few decades. You know how time can be. Just under 200 years? And they've managed to penetrate this deep into the Veneran space? Let's walk and talk, Lasara, the human interrupted, bringing me fully out of my bout of introspection as I nodded in response. So let's get you up to speed. I'm going to assume you're curious as to how I'm standing here. Must think it's some sort of dream or something, right? Venerans do not dream in the great slumber, Elijah. Ah, well, there goes my tangent. That's going to throw me off a bit, but that's good. That means we're getting to the meat of things quicker. He walked me towards a part of the hallway that previously led to a dead end, a simple slab of metal and solid rock. This part of the asteroid was reinforced on both sides, to prevent the gradual chipping and degradation of the structure of the whole station. But now it housed a door. An airlock of human make and design. It opened to reveal a corridor of blinding, searing light, which I hissed at involuntarily. The light felt as if it was somehow even brighter than the device Mitchell had used on me just a few moments ago. Elijah seemed to have taken notice of this, as he snapped his fingers at one of the many robot attendants, the mechanical creature scurrying to some corner of the room, rummaging for something. That explains why your rooms were so dark. Your species is more sensitive to light than we assumed. One of the robots quickly handed me what could only be described as goggles. An aesthetic which reminded me of a workman's standard apparel, one that I recoiled from at first given my class and station. But I quickly relented. Any offense to my station was excusable, so long as I did not spend another second under these accursed lights. Put that on, should automatically adjust the light filtration for you. After a few moments, the room was suddenly of a manageable illumination. My eyes no longer burned, but my headache still remained. I could finally focus on my surroundings, on this humid addition to my clan's warren. My heart skipped a beat, however, as I finally took in my surroundings in full. I saw what could only be described as a lab, the size, scope, and scale of which belonged in an Elderworld's great colleges, not haphazardly attached to a mere warren. Yet the entire room seemed to be empty, devoid of any life but myself and Elijah. So, just to catch you up from where we last met, no, we did not die. You said Mitchell and the rest of your crew were gone. Gone. Gone as in they'd left on the last evac flight out. At that point in time, I wouldn't be surprised if their shuttles were shot down, hence my phrasing. Fortunately, these eldritch interlopers are far less competent than what they had first led us to believe. Hence why we were able to push back reasonably quickly, and hence why I'm standing here today, with the full 4 stars on my shoulders. I only nodded in response, letting out a sigh of relief as for the moment it seemed as if the human was in relatively high spirits. I was stuck here behind enemy lines for a whole year, and in that time the intel I garnered was nothing short of game-changing. They still outperform us in every metric. That fact hasn't changed. Yet. Ship to ship, they outnumber us at least 100,000 to 1. Technologically, they possess tech that can only be described as baffling by even the best and brightest of our scientists. The simple fact of the matter is, they are more technologically advanced, far more numerous, far more established. But they've forgotten how to wield that power. You see, something happens when you're at the top of the pyramid for that long. Something happens to cultures and civilizations when there exists nothing to challenge it. They get complacent. They decay. They rot. And their institutions become withered, unwieldy, and petrified. Too rigid to move, to bend, and to flex. The slightest push cracks them. The human started to grin, a mischievous, clearly predatory one that forced me to instinctively back away. Even at his advanced age, even with his body reduced to what was clearly skin and bones, that predatory gaze still remained. That steely, unrelenting look of a hunter meeting its prey. It forced my frills to collapse and my body to curl into itself. You see, even with all of their advantages on paper, their governments and institutions are archaic. Now, we don't know if they started out this way, or whether they regressed to this state. Not that it matters now. But the fact is they resemble nothing akin to a modern nation-state, and with it they lack the core institutions necessary to drive a real war. They lack the will to properly organize a cohesive doctrine. They lack the ability to develop strategies and tactics. They are incapable of retooling and reorganizing a stellar empire's worth of industrial might towards total war, which cripples their ability to organize, to supply, and to wage war. There is a reason why they've been fighting against each other for the past 200 million years. The interlopers fight battles for glory. Humanity, on the other hand, wages wars for victory. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. Everything I used is in the description below. If there's a story you'd like to hear narrated, let me know and I'll reach out to the author and see if we can make that happen. Thanks again. It's a scary world out there, but remember to be brave and look up, to seek the stars.